Why did the Dallas Cowboys have so much trouble stopping the run on Sunday? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That is prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, are you feeling any better, any worse about this Cowboys game after, a day to kind of think about it, watch the film?
Well, I think watching the Commanders beat the Eagles last night certainly helped. But I think I feel a little bit better. I mean, I we'll get into it, but I feel like going back over it kind of made me feel better about Dak's performance overall. But I think it's still incredibly frustrating to see what was going on and know that Cowboys weren't able to stop ultimately what was happening, especially on defense.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the game, but let's just give you a update of where do the Cowboys stand in terms of the playoff picture, because what happened this weekend is actually kind of funny. According to 538, the Cowboys playoff odds, or the chances to make the playoffs, dropped from 98% down to 93% with a loss. Okay, understandable, right? But because of the outcome that the Eagles had against the Commanders, losing that game, the Cowboys' odds to win the division, despite losing, actually went up from 21 to 25%, and their odds to win the Super Bowl went from 11% to 14%. So this week was actually, despite the loss, a net positive because of what happened with the Eagles, which is absolutely crazy. And the reasoning behind it is, while both teams lost, a division loss is much more important for the Eagles than it is the Cowboys, because if the Cowboys and Eagles happen to have the same records, let's say the Cowboys beat the Eagles on Christmas Eve, the next tiebreaker is division record, which would give the Eagles 2 division losses and the Cowboys would only have 1. So that's why those numbers are what they are.
I'm glad to see, and hopefully 538 makes a permanent pivot to sports forecasting as opposed to the political forecasting. But yes, it is. I mean, obviously, a weird set of circumstances happened, and that's kind of shows you the benefit of booking all those wins early, right? Is that it's only your third loss in 9 games that you played. The margins here are very thin. And the distance between you and some of these other teams beneath you is still pretty significant, despite having lost. Now, I think things could change drastically if you can't beat Minnesota this weekend. Both the positive and the negative way,
right? If you lose to Minnesota, it's probably not going to happen.
And so, I think that's the kind of the one of the other big movers that we should see coming up this week.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the game. We both had a chance to watch the L22 film of this game. Some good, some bad. Let's start with the offense. What was your general thoughts on the Cowboys' offense in this game on Sunday?
Well, I think we need to take a 10,000 foot view real quick. Just step back even further. I think one of the biggest problems that this team is currently having is not, and I feel like we've talked about them separately, but we aren't discussing the cumulative effect of both of them. And I think that this team's inability to start fast and to score early is being compounded and causing problems with the fact that they can't stop the run on a regular basis. they are built to play with a lead and play with more pass rush opportunities. In these games where they don't get as many pass rush opportunities, and they're having to play the run almost the entirety of the game, it really is detrimental to their game plan. And that is where I feel like the offense has got to find a way to get better. And I don't really know how to start, fixing this. Because I think, to me, when I go back and watch the game, the difference between, a good portion of it was Dak Prescott and his throwing motion, and whether it was footing or whatever it is, it didn't feel like the Cowboys actually got in sync offensively until like the third possession of the game.
And that's what that was the third possession they scored on. 17 plays, 83 yards.
And they wasted 2 whole possessions before that, just kind of looking completely out of sync. Dak, again, his footwork was not great, and it showed with his ball placement. And I think that there was obviously there's as well, some miscommunication between the wide receivers. It feels like it just felt like they, the whatever game script they had just straight up didn't work. And this has been a problem for the Cowboys for a while now, that they either have to solve or they've got to figure out a way to greatly increase the run defense, because you cannot have both. And it takes such a monumental effort to recover from that by the time the end of the game rolls around, you're exhausted from trying to dig yourself back out of the hole. So that's why it's kind of 10,000 foot view. I think for the offense, like I said, it just felt like Dak struggled to kind of get his footwork right, which affected his accuracy and velocity. The wide receivers certainly didn't seem to be helping him at certain points. We saw drops from Noah Brown and from Gallup and guys running wrong routes and guys, and then some of it too was I felt like, bad play calling. And I think that you can even determine that from the conversations that the coach has had after the game. They talked about was it the first interception that Schultz? Yeah.
Schultz, the first interception. Yep.
So on that first one, they even kind of admitted that they threw that, they called that play too close to the red zone. I mean, too close to the end zone. There wasn't enough space downfield to let that develop in order for CD to pull the safety away from the middle of the field and open things up for Schultz. So Dak threw the ball in a timing situation before the breaks were made, because that's the way that you have to throw it. And, because the way because it was called in such a tight formation, it just didn't work out for them. And it's just like, it's stuff like that. Like the offense doesn't seem very coordinated. And that's what I think is frustrating with the Kellen Moore offense at times, is that there are definitely times when you're watching it and they do creative, cool stuff. They get people open in neat ways. They have cool formational stuff that they do that can, really kind of mess with the defensive cues. But at the same time, they also seem to mess with themselves at times. And the Cowboys can't seem to follow what they're supposed to be doing on some of these plays. And I think that's where it was frustrating, is that and again, it's not any one thing, right? It seems to be the wide receivers having issues, the quarterback having footwork issues, the offensive coordinator having play calling issues. And then on top of that, I think guys that, have been holding on for dear life and just sliding by didn't do that last Sunday. McGovern played really terribly. And it's starting to kind of show in a major way.
What's so weird about this offense is it's almost like an all or nothing offense. And you can go look at the play-by-play from not only this game, but against the Chicago Bears. It was the same thing. It's either we're putting together a 16-play, 75-yard touchdown drive, or we're going 3 and out. And there's really no in between. And that's exactly what it was on Sunday. And it's just that first couple plays of every drive are so nerve-wracking because they rely so much on getting off to a hot start. And if they only get 4 yards on first down and second down's an incompletion, it feels like the drive fails. That's where I don't complain about Kellen Moore as much as other people do, but Kellen needs to do a better job sometimes of just getting this offense into some kind of rhythm just to get a first down, right? If you need to do something kind of creative, whether it's a jet sweep or a wide receiver screen, just to get you a first down, do that, because they just shot themselves in the foot too often on the first couple of plays of drives.
It just feels like they need to simplify. I mean, this is the same thing that was happening last year at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the year last year, it just felt like despite having all this firepower, the offense couldn't do simple things.
The difference is now they don't have that same firepower.
Yeah, but it didn't make a difference then.
No,
either.
I know.
It's like, so it's. I don't think it's a firepower issue. I think it's just a simply performing when they need to. I don't know if they just need to simplify things a little bit more, but I certainly agree with what you were just saying a second ago. They've got to figure out this game script thing, man. Like, it just cannot be so complicated that you can't get your quarterback in rhythm while executing the game plan. Like,
and they're going to have problems this week against the Vikings, who are, I think, right now they're number one in the league in the opening game script, like in points per opening drive. Dallas is near the bottom. They've got to figure out a way to start faster, and it's crazy that the Cowboys continue to take the ball first in every single game, despite having problems getting off to a hot start. Right?
I mean, I think it's the thought is that they want to try to get things right. They want to kind of be aggressive there, and I just think that it's not working out for them. So they need to simplify. They need to is it less option routes? Is it less routes that have tags on them? Is it more just more simplified scheme and just executing better? I'm not sure, but at this point, like, they have got to figure something out that allows them to not waste the entire first quarter trying to get their offense to start playing football. And I'm kind of exhausted watching it, to be honest.
I want to talk a little bit more about the offense before we talk about the run defense issues. But we want to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their prize pick projection, you win. And you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on just about any sport that you watch. That includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They are currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the Prize Pick app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. You deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. We also want to tell you about Simply Safe. If you thought about securing your home with home security, but you've been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Cowboys listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Simply Safe is a whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. They have HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real. And they even have hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that we recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That is simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. There is no safe like Simply Safe. All right, Landon, let's talk about the receivers, because I think CeeDee Lamb played really good in this game minus one route, right? And I think that route even we can have a debate about. I've seen people.
I don't think there's a debate there.
Okay, go ahead. I mean, what's your argument?
Middle field closed. You gotta run in front of that safety. End of story. Like, that's a play as old as time. Like, you have to run in front of that safety. I don't know why he's drifting upfield. I just don't know.
I also think Dak doesn't need to throw that ball there in the where they're at that point, right?
Look, like we can get on Dak on throwing the balls in the middle of the field on timing routes, but at the same time, like that's where they make a lot of their money, and that's where they make a lot of their big plays. And I've seen it people saying it both ways. Dak needs to throw with more anticipation. Dak doesn't throw with more anticipation. Dak needs to stop throwing these balls in the middle of the field. Like we can't have it both ways. Sometimes he's got to throw the ball, and you got to have the receiver be where he needs to be. CeeDee Lamb, despite being a fantastic receiver, and this is a problem for him, and he needs to fix this. Like, and I understand that this is there's been talk about the fact that they've missed time together. This has nothing to do with any timing with Dak or anything. This has to do with understanding the route that you're running. This is very basic stuff, and like CeeDee Lamb needs to be more consistently on where he needs to be.
I would also say that Green Bay knew it was coming, right? And that's why the safety was just sitting right there, because they know that the Cowboys have run that same route a million times. I don't think you're wrong.
And I think if CD runs it, it plays out exactly the same way as it played out when he caught that ball on this exact same route against Green Bay later in the game, right? Where he ran the correct route and he caught it. So, I think we could talk to Dak about not throwing the football with anticipation, but like you're really limiting the amount of routes that you're going to be able to run if Dak can't throw the ball before the wide receiver breaks and expects him to be there.
The bigger issue for me is teams just aren't afraid of the other receivers on this team at all, and it's getting to a point now where it's an issue, right? Like we like what Noah Brown was doing early in the year. I don't know if he's still a little bit banged up, but he just didn't have a very good game. Michael Gallup he looks so slow compared to what we're used to.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to get healthier. Like, but beyond that,
it's hurting the offense, though.
Well, I mean, look, part of it too is that they weren't getting any calls, and so they had, and like whatever. That's part of the game at times, right? So if you get it, you got to fight through that physically. They just weren't able to physically fight through it. But I mean, there was just like
they weren't getting calls. I mean, flat out. Now, the issue is it's more than likely that the Cowboys are going to be on the road in the playoffs, right? And you might be playing in San Francisco. You might be playing in Tampa Bay. You're going to have to learn how to play through contact and kind of out physical some of these defensive backs. And with Gallup and Noah Brown both being bigger receivers, that's kind of how you have to win anyways, right? You're not going to run by guys. So they need to figure things out a little bit there.
Brown, especially. For me, Gallup, I think wasn't as bad as I expected going back. There was several plays where he ran a double move past Jared Alexander, and Alexander just straight tackled him, and they didn't call it. Like, there was one in particular where he runs a stop and go, and he stops, and then as soon as Jared's feet settle, he's up the field, and Jared's like, whoop, and just wrapped his arm around him, and they both fell down like it was incidental contact. I agree, though. I mean, look, you're just not going to get all those calls all the time. You would hope to get, maybe the big one at the end of the game, or maybe the two of the consecutive DPIs that happened on the last major drive of regulation. But you can't expect it, and you certainly you can't allow it to like help you lose the game. Like you've got to find a way to fight through that. Noah Brown went up and had his hands on a deep pass that he has got to come down with. Yep. Michael Gallup had another one that he went up and had his hands on. He's got to come down with. Tony Pollard had one on an outlet that at the time when watching it, I was like, man, he threw that Dak threw that too high. It was fine. It hit Pollard in the hands. You got to come down with that and turn upfield and make the plays. I think the big difference between the Cowboys and the Packers offense to me was that they were turning 1 yard gains into 4 yard gains. They were getting the nickel and dime stuff that the Cowboys weren't able to break that extra tackle or weren't able to get that extra 3 or 4 yards. That the Cowboys just weren't able to execute the assignments and then do the little bit extra to kind of get the yards that they needed.
Yeah, all other difference is that they have some speed on offense that the Cowboys just don't have. And they're just not going to get it this year, right? Like they just don't have a Christian Watson on their offense right now. And it's okay. If you don't have to have that player to be an elite offense, it's just something the Cowboys don't have. Let's talk about the defense because we've talked about the offense enough. I want to start with Micah before we get to the defensive line. I don't think he played very well in this game, Landon. And he was talking after the game about gap integrity and players doing their own thing. I saw multiple times in this game where Micah took the wrong gap and it resulted in big gains. The Cowboys were very clearly wanted to play Micah as an off the ball linebacker in this game. He had moments where he looked good, but it's just not what we were expecting from Micah Parsons.
He just looks tired. He just looks exhausted and physically beat up, and just
And this
it
is
really
coming off a
showed in
bye
this
week.
game. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know what is going on there, but I mean, he just didn't look himself, and I'm hoping he can correct it or something. I don't know what's going on, but he didn't look comfortable at linebacker. He didn't look great at defensive end either.
Vander Esch
so
outplayed him at linebacker. I don't think it's even close.
no, yeah, Vander Esch had a good game, and I think the issue to me in this game was not so much the linebackers. The issue is the defensive line. And defensive tackles were completely inconsistent. It's not like it was one guy getting beat up or one guy who's having a horrible game or one guy who's having a great game. They were all playing very up and down, and it was snap to snap. The main thing to me that was the struggle for the Cowboys run defense was an inability to kind of stop things at the edge. They were trying to out angle the Cowboys all game. They were trying to use motion and it's look, it's the same thing that McVay, that Shanahan is going to do. They're going to mess with your run keys. They're going to get you out on the edge.
Do it this week, right?
Yeah, I mean probably. I think that's the problem. Is look, they got away with, and this is smart football. I'm not necessarily accusing cheating or anything, right? Like they got away with one hold on almost every single one of those edge plays, and that's all they had to do, right? All they needed was to make sure that they had secured 2 or 3 of these blocks for a second, and they got the angle, and then suddenly your guys can't get to the edge, and your guys can't stop the flow of offensive linemen or pullers that are coming across the formation. And Aaron Jones gets the corner, and it's a 4-yard gain before he even gets touched, Yep. It's good play design because they'd often have bunch formations, and either they'd have the wide receiver crack on a crack toss, they'd crack the defensive end and toss it outside and get outside, creating a wall to stop the flow of linebackers, or they'd have a tight end who would push the defensive end inside to allow the offensive tackle to get the angle on him to seal him inside. They also were just the Cowboys were basically unable to stop that until they started kind of playing their defensive ends a little bit wider, and it kind of stopped the temporary inability to kind of seal off the edge because they couldn't quite get the angle on the wide 9 defensive end. But as soon as the game started switching to more of a passing game, the Cowboys kind of put their defensive ends back inside on 7 techniques. They went right back to it and were able to get outside. And again, like it's savvy because you've got everyone moving laterally as opposed to getting vertical. Right. And I think that's easier for savvy offensive linemen to, kind of subtly get a hand outside on the shoulder pad, or in DeMarcus Lawrence's case, grabbing his helmet while inside the ear hole and leg whipping the backside defender while he's falling down. They're able to subtly get just what they need, just enough, and that's all it takes. And Aaron Jones, he was getting to the corner, and like I said, it was just kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts that eventually in the second half turned into larger gains.
All right, we'll talk a little bit more about the defense. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar. They've got 3 new awesome flavors out there right now: cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper. They also have a white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on granola bar. It's more filling and insanely tasty. And for the holidays, they got the Kitty Cane Brownie Puff. It's absolutely fantastic. If you've never tried Built Bar before, you need to check it out. 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low calories. Most Built Bars are like 130-ish calories. Just sink your teeth into that first bite, and it'll change your life forever. Go to built.com to get 15% off your next order by using the promo code LOCKEDON15. Again, at built.com. Right before we jumped on the show, I ordered a new box of the coconut brownie chunk. My personal favorite. I got the text last night that it's back in stock for the first time in about a year. Go check it out. Also, go try out the cookie dough one. Absolutely fantastic. 15% off by using LOCKEDON15 at built.com. All right, let's talk about the corners. We could talk about their coverage, but it's pretty clear to me now, Landon, that teams are just going to attack them in the run game until they prove they can start to tackle. Like you talked about some of these wide runs where they're pitching the ball out to the outside. They need Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland and Anthony Brown just to tackle better, or else this is going to continue to be a problem going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly part of it. I would say that to me, it's the lesser of the problem, because ultimately what you need those corners to do is not necessarily even make those tackles as much as forcing guys back inside.
Right. And there were some times where that just wasn't happening. Right.
There were some times that wasn't happening for sure. But there were also, I think that that's one thing that if Anthony Brown doesn't play this weekend, I think Kelvin Joseph is a little bit better. That's one of the things he's actually okay about. He doesn't mind throwing his body physically around.
He's just a more physical player. Yep.
Yeah. So hopefully that there's a little bit of an uptick there. I think to me the bigger problem there is on the edge. They've got to figure out.
Yeah, they did not play well other than DeMarcus Lawrence.
I honestly think they need to play more Basham. I think this is something that Basham is just better at. Golson has just not been
well, and that's
a
big problem, right? And I was actually talking with John Owning, our friend of ours, on Twitter yesterday. They drafted Chauncey Golston not because he was a good pass rusher, but because he was supposed to help stop the run. And he can't even be active in games where they're going to run the ball because he's so bad against the run right now.
He's neither here nor there. He's just not playing great inside as a pass rusher in a 3-technique situation. He's not playing great outside as a run defender. He's not holding the edge. Yeah, I mean, they got to figure something out there. And look, I also saw the Cowboys, I think, are another team that maybe the Cowboys defense is another unit that I think could benefit a little bit from just kind of simplifying things a little bit more. I think they got burned by a lot of their stunts and slants and twists. So, the Cowboys are way ahead of the curve as far as the amount of stunts and twists that they call in the defense. I think that maybe they should just look at reducing that a little bit.
Dial a little bit back, right?
Yeah.
Until you get leads.
Yeah, just because it's just it's not been very sound in the run defensive game. They get caught, and again, when the Cowboys are in trouble, it's when teams get angles on them, right? And they can eliminate the Cowboys' speed. That's what's happening a lot of time, is that you see this defensive line at the time that the running back is approaching the line of scrimmage, where they're all just clumped together because they're trying to move around and they get caught up, and they can't get past the wash to get into the gap where they need to go, and they just sometimes I think need to kind of simplify things a little bit more and see if they can beat their man.
They also need their safeties to play better. We love Malik Hooker. He didn't play well in this game. He didn't. I don't know if it's because he's still dealing with a hamstring injury or what, but he didn't play particularly well. Donovan Wilson had a personal foul call that you just can't have. You can't give a team like Green Bay free 15 yards. They just need guys to play better. I think it sounds so simple, but it's kind of the truth.
Yeah, I mean, they just, there were several players who just didn't have good games, and I'm not necessarily chalking it up to trends or anything like that, but, you just can't have that many players playing poorly. And look, I also think that we got to say, I don't know I don't know where the blame is, but I'll tell you the problem is no one could stay standing on that field.
And that's what I was going to say is, I would expect the defense to look better this week playing in Minnesota on artificial turf. They just play better on those kind of fields. The issue is, again, I'm going to keep pointing this out. There's a very good chance that they're going to have to play on the road throughout the entire playoffs. So you might have to play in San Francisco where the field's not great, right? You might have to play some places where, hey, it's Philadelphia and the field's really choppy. You're right. But I also wonder, is this still going to be a long-term issue for them?
Well, I think it depends on what happened, right? I mean, it sounded like people were calling other players out for not heeding the warning about the cleats, and to me, if they're able to actually go, oh yeah, maybe I'll actually wear the cleats this time, then maybe they're okay. But that's what I guess I wanted to point out, is that I don't, obviously have any insight here. All I know is what I saw, and what I saw was that anybody that was in the middle of the field between the numbers was falling down.
Yep.
And it seemed to be a lot more Cowboys falling down than Packers falling down.
Yeah.
And it even seemed to be guys who I would assume would have done the right thing with the cleats, like DeMarcus Lawrence and some of these other folks. So
That have played in Green Bay before.
yeah.
Right?
So I honestly wonder too if that it wasn't part of the issue at times with some of the double team stuff, because I just don't think the big guys were able to plant their feet, and so it certainly was a problem for Dak early on, throwing the football. I think he wasn't able to kind of get his feet set or foot pointed the right direction or move his feet quickly enough to set to throw the football. But the Cowboys got to find a way to get around that, and playing on the road is definitely going to be something they're going to have to do in the future. We'll see how much they're able to correct over the next week. This is obviously a big game against Minnesota.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All the same places that you get the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to answer your Twitter questions. We've got a crossover show with Luke from Locked On Vikings coming up on Thursday. And then you and I back on Friday to preview this monster game against the Vikings here in week 11. Again, follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you guys next time.